from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased. Joining me from India, Ali Hafizji. Ali, the way I like to do it is I keep it to my guests to, introduce themselves just as a, kind of a teaser to the audience. We're going to talk about something we touched before, but I think, we always like to have different opinions, especially Ali is like a veteran entrepreneur. I can say he have founded 2 companies, but without further ado, Ali, I will pass it to you and then we can start the conversation from there.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on the call. I'm looking forward to this conversation and also, just through you sort of speaking to your audience. Just give you a quick background about a little bit about what I've done so far. So I'm actually an engineer by profession, and I turned into a marketer and then finally into an entrepreneur. I've just been building digital businesses throughout my entire career, both as a business owner as well as somebody who's actually hands-on and programming and building the digital product itself. At the moment, I run an agency called Wednesday. And Wednesday actually started somewhere in the 2020 timeframe. And I was just finishing with another company, which we had to shut down because of COVID. And right after that, I decided to start Wednesday. I've always had this sort of obsession with the software development process. And I used to read a lot of books about like agile and waterfall and all of these different processes that people have in place. And I would always see that there's a difference between what is written in the book and what is actually happening in the real world. So I said that, this time we're just going to solve this one problem, which is we're just going to build teams of engineers who are actually delivering not just what's written, but actually more than what's that. And maybe even create our own standards of software development. So that's what I'm sort of heads down focused on, just building teams of great software engineers and designers who would sort of take decisions the same way that I would. And we're just helping startups. So we're just working with early stage founders from their MVP to PMF journeys. And that's what Wednesday is about.
Great. And thank you again, Ali, for being here with me today. So let's deep dive a little bit, with the MVP, right? So we see, MVP is a milestone. No one can deny this. But let's talk about what happens, after you get your MVP. Like, what should happen actually in the first months or 30 days? What do you think founders should be actually doing once the MVP is out?
Well, you're right to point out that an MVP is a milestone, and just the way that you have a developmental milestone, at which point you start doing newer activities or new things. An MVP is a milestone in a journey of an entrepreneur where they need to start doing different things, which is also something that people don't do. So here's what I think founders should actually focus on after after they have their MVP. And in fact, they should probably focus on this even after the first 30 days. But they primarily need to focus their efforts on 2 key metrics, which is, acquisition and retention. And what these metrics measure is the number of users that you're sort of onboarding to your product and the number of users who are repeatedly coming back to actually use the product. And if you move your focus to just measuring these 2 things, you end up having more time to do different things. So, for example, I think that what founders need to start doing when they reach MVP is they need to focus their effort on doing four other things, which is they should focus their effort on doing distribution or marketing, sales, fundraising, and also just lastly, talking to customers on a one-on-one basis. And when they start doing these four things, they would realize that their life is very different pre-MVP. Potentially pre-MVP, they were just sort of building something out. They already knew who they were going to sell that particular product to, which is how they identified the gap. But after MVP, they need to start doing these four things, and then potentially maybe have a team or hire a team to actually build it out.
Great, Ali. And this is brings, the discussion to the thing that I always I have prepared for. So what you're describing, right, is
Mhm,
what we call, product market fit, right?
mhm.
So now the question is, what do you think? And you give it yourself a name. You call it the dangerous gap between MVP and PMF or product market fit.
Yeah,
Why do you think it's a dead zone, right? So you
yeah,
said they have to go do this, they have to go that. Now, yourself as a founder, and by the way, so people when the word founder comes to their mind, they think you are just building, I mean, a product yourself. But this
mhm.
applies, I think, even if you're building a service for other
Sure.
companies, right? So tell me about, this dead zone or dangerous zone, you call it, or dangerous gap, and how people can they survive it.
I think, okay, it's a very interesting question. I think so. We see this happen a lot just because we work with so many founders in this region, sort of in this zone. So I think what happens right now is most founders who have some MVP and a few customers who are willing to pay for that particular product, they end up being part of some accelerator or incubator, and they usually raise some kind of seed money. What happens then is that it leads to, I would say, a lot of focus on vanity metrics. And this is something that people really need to be aware of as a founder. So metrics such as, the number of visitors to my website or number of PR mentions or social media mentions or just the number of app installs, these do not mean that you have PMF. In fact, it's the complete opposite. What I do see happen is that when people start focusing a lot on these metrics, it fuels the need to build things that nobody wants. So, for example, when you start going after these metrics, you start to think that maybe whatever I built is useful to people, and then you start sort of reinforcing your own belief system as to, if I put something out there, it will work. And people start building features and a lot of parallel products, etc., without really validating the need for it. We also see people spend a lot of their initial time and money doing marketing activities using scalable channels, just paid advertisements, etc., without really knowing if that works or not, using like a one-to-one approach. They don't really know what messaging works, and then they start running all of these campaigns. So I feel like this is where most startups sort of don't reach that beautiful period of PMF because they sort of um, go after a lot of these vanity metrics. In fact, we've seen almost, 50 to 60% of startups fail because of two primary reasons, which is, you know, doing too much too soon, and just not having the right team, which is just the founders micromanaging and doing everything. And that's where the journey ends for the founder, and they don't get to realize the full potential of that dream.
Right. So if I want to take your words, Ali, and what you're describing is very very true. So it's like building something no one wants,
Mhm.
right? And assuming that people will want it.
Yeah.
And I know the audience, if they follow, I keep telling them, I refer them to go read the blogs of Steve Blank, Professor Steve
Mhm.
Blank, who talks a lot and a lot. And his book, The Epiphany, you should read this book. Like it talks about product market fit. And to your point,
Mhm.
Ali, I think, yeah, people, I can't blame, by the way, some founders because, out
Yeah.
there are a lot of noise,
Mhm.
especially on LinkedIn and other platforms where people talk something about the metrics and all this. In simple term, and this from my humble view and opinion, a product market fit happen when you are able to get the product out, put it in the hands of the people love it, people will pay for it, and then you find a way to repeat this again and again and again. So it's finding repeatable business model for your product, right? So uh,
Correct.
but I don't know who to blame. Who to blame for this. But anyway, it's a discussion for maybe another day. Now, now, let's keep, in this zone between, the MVP and the PMF. What do you
Mhm.
think? You mentioned few, okay? But what do you think some of the traps that founders fall into
Mhm.
after the MVP? Like other than, not doing the sales and all this. So, and maybe I should also ask you, like the
Mhm.
MVP itself, I'm loading the question, but I want you to feel free to explore more. So when MVP is, has more than it should have, because you mentioned this in the answer,
Yeah.
and when it's not complete. And you work with a lot of other startups, founders yourself, Ali. So what you can tell us about that?
Yeah. I think that one of the biggest killers in this zone is just premature scaling. Um, a lot of startups sort of fail because of that. They 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 start doing things without really validating whether this is scalable in the first place. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So, for example, marketing. I think this is a huge spend that startups have. They have that MVP. They find out that, yeah, I know these 10 people who actually are going to use it. Maybe there's going to be more. And then, bam, you roll out like a huge paid campaign and you start doing ads, etc. Um, this is, I think, like a pretty big trap for founders. They should not do that. Um, Most early users are using it because you know them. Um, you need to find out a way that gets more people to actually use that particular product and then convert it into something that is scalable. Similarly, I also think that other issues include um, just hiring too fast. I think a lot of founders just bloat up on the ability to build things, which may be just hiring too many engineers or having just like a large team. Um, and then you eventually end up building like a feature factory and because they have to build something. Um, I also I also see a lot of founders obsess about the tech in the early days. While I'm not saying that you shouldn't build a product that isn't functioning, but I don't think you need to obsess about scalability right in the very beginning. You can like pretty much work off of um, a simple EC2 instance if that's something that you know of, like how to program, or you can even use a simple Firebase database or anything like a no-code platform during the initial iterations, even after MVP. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think most founders who have like an engineering background, many a times sort of over obsess about how do I build this versus is this useful in the first place? Does it actually move a business metric for me? Lastly, I think a huge, I'm just going to add one more thing, is that um, founding teams, I think a very big killer is that if every conversation that they have isn't about the core product loop, then something is wrong. Like, for example, every time if a founding team meets and they're not talking about the core product loop, which is, what are the number of steps that a user takes to actually get the value that you promise them? So let's say you have a legal tech product or an HR tech product or whatever it is. what are the steps that the user interacts with to get that value that you promise? If your conversations are not around that, but they're about other things, then it's probably a pretty big trap. Like that's a good way to identify whether you're moving in the right direction. This is something the founders can try as they, have discussions with their team, as they meet their team on a regular basis. Just see how many conversations are about this.
Right. Now, talking about again, it's doing a startup, you're gonna be, as you said, a lot of iterations sometimes, and
Yeah.
you need to have the balance, I would say, between the metrics you collect. So you need to
Hmm.
be watching the right metrics, right? And I would say it depends. And I like something you mentioned, Ali, even at the introduction and the first few minutes of the conversation, like the, because you mentioned about the book and what's in the real life, and this is
Yeah.
applies to what we see. I tell people, reading articles, reading books. I still read books, on daily basis. It gives us kind of a framework, or let's say like a bigger, as they call it, like 40,000 feet view of what's there. But it's on up to us to go and decide. And sometimes it's like a mix of
Correct.
this, gut feeling decision,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's gonna be data driven. And it depends on your business and what kind of customer section you have, right? So
Yeah.
now, you mentioned also something about, iteration. You mentioned something about, uh, finding this balance. You mentioned about engineers. And this is, brings the topic which everyone talks about today. And you mentioned about tech founders and non-tech founders. So
Hmm.
I'm going to talk about AI, right? So first, what role can AI plays in this process? I mean, post MVP. What do you think AI can help founders with?
I think AI is a complete game changer, right? So AI is a complete game changer in terms of the way products are built, the way products are distributed, the way they're marketed. I think it even changes or affects the way that the software development process itself. I think Agile itself needs to change now, but we can talk about that in another one. But I think the way that it helps founders is um, they need to really start using AI as like a tool to help them do their to help them in their new role post MVP. So, for example, whether it is marketing, sales, distribution, or just talking to customers, AI can be an extremely amazing tool to sort of co-pilot you in not only just identifying like what to do, but also how to do it. So you can, I mean, I would highly request, like, I think this is an amazing tool that founders need to start using, but not just, don't just prompt AI and ask them like, give them the entire context and say that like in this context, what do I do? You can also use it as a thinking engine. And you can give it broad-based questions and ask it like, what would it do if it was in your place? And it'll be pretty amazing for founders to know, let's say, how do I conduct a user interview, or how do I plan, let's say, an outreach strategy to get like a couple of people to sign up for my product, or how do I create like a LinkedIn post, something so easy, but many founders aren't just social, right? Like they're probably doing it for the first time, or maybe even the second time, but they've played a very different role before, and this can really assist founders just as a co-pilot. So I think founders need to start using this as a co-pilot in their new role. But I also think that they should start looking for people, if they are hiring, who are sort of AI natives. And I think that's a huge test for the pace at which they will move. So, for example, if you're hiring engineers or designers or even product people, see if they use AI for their craft. It'll help you move at a rapid pace. So if you're thinking of hiring an engineer and they are an AI native engineer or a prompt engineer, you will be amazed at the pace at which they can get things done. Because in the early days, what matters is your ability to iterate. Um, so yeah, I think that AI is a huge plus.
Cool. Now, we mentioned engineering a lot of times, and here,
Yeah.
uh, And you are an engineer. I come also from engineering background. Is AI replacing us as software
Mhm,
engineers? Are we now able to, let's say, give our hats
mhm,
to the AI and rely on it 100% at least, because we are seeing a lot of things regarding this, to give it to the AI to develop the
mhm,
MVP, or we are still early. Yeah, AI can generate code, can help us, create things, but we still need an engineer, you know,
mhm.
uh, view and experience pre MVP stage. What do you say, Ali?
Oh, pre-MVP? I don't think so. I genuinely believe that pre-MVP, the founder can use a lot of tools to build something out and just show it to a couple of people. But I think post-MVP, for sure, you need to do it because your role changes. Even post-PMF, you need an engineering team now. The the composition of that team will be very different from what it was even like 2 years ago to now, right? So I think that has definitely impacted um, not just the composition, but also who you hire. So, for example, there is a very big difference between a programmer and a product engineer. They're very different people. So, for example,
Mm,
a programmer would just do what he's told, write the code, do spec, right? But somebody has to do the thinking, which is what is the architecture of this system going to be? What are the API interfaces going to be? What is the what are the tests that it needs to pass? All of that is done, but a product engineer does not do that. A product engineer does the thinking as well. So I'll give you an example. So let's say there is a product engineer you know, who's building a login page for a particular application. And the goal is that you take a user's phone number, they enter an OTP, and then they sort of log in. Um, a product engineer will think about things like, how is this error message going to be shown? you know when the user enters the OTP, how easy is it to do that on the phone? Does it autofill? Does it not autofill? Like, how do I check if the phone number is the correct length or not? How do I support international numbers? They're actually thinking about more than just coding that particular interface. They're thinking about the user interface. They're thinking about how the user is going to actually is there going to be friction in this particular workflow? They are thinking about how what I'm doing is going to affect the business metric, which is acquisition. Now, when you have somebody do that, they can use AI tools to build it out, but the outcome is very different. You now have a person who's actually changing your business metric, which is acquisition, versus somebody who you have to actually give an entire stack to. So I think team structure will change drastically. I also think team sizes will change drastically. So, for example, if you had like a normal sprint being run by, a couple of engineers and designers, a product manager, project manager, your typical agile structure, that will change a lot, maybe even reduce substantially.
Ali, let me ask you, like, as a follow-up question. So, are you saying that the days, and it used to happen a lot, where
Mhm,
especially non-technical founders
mhm.
used to hire teams to build MVP, and then they either decide to hire insiders, or they keep outsourcing that. Are you saying, or do you see that this trend is now fading, because now anyone, similarly to what, in to an extent, because it had a lot of limitations, what no code have done. So no
Yeah.
code allowed non-founders, non-tech founders, to at least bring their ideas to life. But we know that no code, although it's no code, still there's a heavy lifting, and it's not like very flexible. But the generation of AI agents, and just for the sake, I'm not affiliated with any, but I think
Mhm.
everyone knows about Lovable and Replit
Yeah.
and Versal and so now, can we say very soon, non-technical founders, they would not need to hire teams to build their MVP?
I don't know. So I don't know if that's going to change the bio. motion, right? Because it's not like people don't hire agencies to do websites; they still do it. But
Mm-hmm.
on the other hand, there are businesses that are, you know, $1 million plus just selling WordPress templates. So I think there's best of both worlds. I think we're going to see a lot more entrepreneurs in general solving problems. You know, the folks that want convenience will probably hire an agency to build out the MVP. But what I think is going to matter is that the time to build the MVP will be drastically less. So it should affect your cost.
That time will, yeah, you made a point, Ali, honestly, which I didn't think about it, which, yeah, till now people pay hefty amounts, by the way, for website designs. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, they get good results as well, like it's not like something. And WordPress plugins, yeah, and I think, some of these tools gonna stay for a while because
Mhm.
adoption is gonna take time, is in my opinion, and then yeah, we will see what will happen. But coming back to generally, about the idea of outsourcing, right?
Mhm.
So what's your take on this? Like when it's too early, when it's like not done properly.
Mm.
So best practices you've seen like for startups to leverage the offshoring of talents
Yeah.
without sacrificing on quality or control.
Yeah. So I think that just outsourcing, whether you do it near shore or offshore, um, is it typically fails because you don't have an evaluation mechanism. Um, Most offshoring or nearshoring happens because people they don't really have set criteria as to how, if I do this, it will affect my business. Um, they typically do it for, and if you're doing it for reducing cost, then that's a completely different ball game because you know that that will affect that particular metric, and then you should be fine with that, not expect more. But usually, it doesn't stop there. Every business who outsources starts looking for advantages beyond just cost measures. So they are looking for things like, hey, how does can this team, create a roadmap by themselves? Can they do the thinking? Can they actually use AI? They do all these things. Um, so I think if you are deciding to offshore, you should have a very clear evaluation mechanism. You know, most founders want to work with teams that will actually go back and forth with them. For example, but let's say, for example, if we're working with a founder, we will, when they come to us with a list of features they want to build, we'll actually ask them saying that, why do you want to build this feature? Do you have data that backs that somebody needs this feature? We will it'll become in a consultative fashion so that they realize that, hey, at this point, I need to start doing this, and they will start talking to their user and so slowly start moving in the right direction. Um, to build this kind of team yourself will take you some time. So I think, if this is something that you're looking for, which is, um, a team that has done it a couple of times, if that is a part of your evaluation criteria, sure, outsource, but then look for that. Know how to look for that. See if they have those frameworks, see if they actually have those practices in place. There are, a number of ways in which you can find that out. Um, so yeah, my advice would be, you know, um, the minute your role changes at each developmental stage, you will need help. Whether it's an in-house team or whether it's an offshore team or whether it's an nearshore team, you should know what you need and try and evaluate for that. So, for example, in the MVP to PMF stage, you need smart iterations. So you need to be able to work with a team that goes back and forth doing that with you. So look for that. Post PMF, you probably need scalability, you need parallel products, you need other things. Look for teams who have the capability of doing that. And once you're an enterprise, then there are different kinds of things that you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. They would need it. It's a different angle. Just a quick one here. Um,
Yeah.
do you, especially like, okay, regardless what tools, what kind of MVP they are building, So if they go with
Mhm.
the with the outsourcing approach, do you still advise them to at least have maybe a what we call fractional CTO, or maybe a fractional product person? So at least, because if they are coming from a non-technical background, so
Mhm.
probably they don't know what a sprint is, and they don't know that to build
Yeah.
even the MVP, like there are like some steps that needs to happen. So MVP, so people think the MVP, yeah, like just like let's put the coders, let's give the design to the UI and UX guys, and let someone come and stitch it all together, and here we go. It's not like this, right? So AI
Yeah.
makes it looks easy now, but if
Yeah.
you're and even if you are using AI for coding, you still need someone to at least oversee the progress. So do you advise to have such role in a startup, which is the fractional person, whether a CTO, CPO, whatever you want to call it?
I think it always helps. I think having somebody who's been there, done that always helps. It just depends on the founder and then sort of their network, right? So I think apart from just overseeing whether it's done correctly, they could have other benefits of having a fractional CTO as well. So, for example, every investor meeting that I've gone to, they've always requested for somebody who's like got technical chops to be part of the core team. It helps you raise funds. It helps you get credibility in let's say a partnership deal that you're doing with somebody else. You're integrating two different products. It helps you gain authority and trust there as well, having somebody internal who is having those conversations. So I think it always helps to have somebody sort of playing this role. It just depends on the founder. I feel like there's no right or wrong here, but I think the more the merrier. The more people that are sort of helping you move to that cause. And I think fundraising is a super important thing that founders need to pay attention to during this phase. And a fractional CTO is a huge, huge benefit. If you can, do it.
Absolutely. To your point about fundraising, and I think investors look to
Mm,
teams, right?
mm,
Uh, of course, they look at what you're building, what you're solving, how big is your market. Uh, if they are kind of investors who invest in traction, so they're gonna
mm.
ask about your MVP and how people are using it and so on. But yeah, team, because I'm gonna give a hint from my from my humble experience, I would say, because they at some stage, if they are convinced with you, the idea, the market, they're gonna go and do due diligence on you, and
Yeah,
guess what? They're gonna go and give it to someone who is probably a previous CTO, right? Or
yeah.
someone who at least have the technology background. So yeah, absolutely. Um, Ali, if as we're almost close to the end, if you want to leave the audience with some like final thoughts and like final advice, especially regarding all what we discussed today, so what you would tell them, and I want you also to tell us how people can get in touch and find more about you and your company.
Sure. Well, if you're a sort of early stage founder, you've got an MVP and you're sort of in that journey to find PMF, my advice would be, to understand that your role has changed. You need to start focusing more on distribution, marketing, sales, fundraising, and just talking to your customers, listen to them. Um, uh, 100% put your effort in trying to build a team or work with somebody else. Don't just spend all your time doing that, time and money. Um, where can you find me? You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Ali Hafizji on LinkedIn. You can also visit our website, which is wednesday.is, and use the contact us form. I'm always happy to have a chat with anybody. If you want to jam ideas, want to know about what we do, happy to chat.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ali. And for the audience, don't worry. The links will be in the show notes if you are listening on your favorite podcasting app. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will find it in the description. Again, Ali, I think this is a wake up call for a lot of founders about, we focus on, post MVP because it's a milestone as I started the discussion, but you gave very good insights and very good, you know, tips for the founders, which I think they will find them very, very useful. I really thank you for your time today, Ali. And
Thank
as I
you.
said, yeah, and as I said, the links will be in the show notes. And this is how I end my episodes. This is for the audience. Guys, if you just discovered this podcast by luck, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, please give me a favor, subscribe and share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you are one of the people who keep coming again and again, thank you so much for doing so. Because of you, we are ranking in multiple countries on the top 200 charts in the Apple podcast. I really, 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 really appreciate. This cannot happen without two factors. First, you, the audience. Second, also big thank you to all my guests. It's not about me. It's all about, sharing the knowledge and getting people, to succeed in their entrepreneurial journeys. And as I say always, stay tuned and we'll meet again very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.